One significant barrier to establishing equitable services for all victims is that the main public funding scheme that pays for them is presently effectively ring-fenced exclusively for women-only services. The Supporting People programme underpins vital supported housing service for around 20,000 vulnerable people in Northern Ireland every year at the cost of £73 million. The Northern Ireland Housing Executive, who administer this fund on behalf of the Department of Communities, estimate that 38% is spent on services for those at risk of homelessness, including victims of domestic abuse. Many different groups of vulnerable people benefit from support from this programme, and yet domestic abuse is the only strand where access to services is distinctly restricted to service users solely on the basis of their sex. The Department of Communities have advised us that male victims, and I quote, have not been identified as an area of priority need, and that in the absence of support, the NI Housing Executive work with them to identify temporary accommodation, which largely means allocations in homeless hostels, either run directly by them or by a third party. Now, with the greatest respect to those service providers, specialist domestic violence services provide a distinctly different type and standard of service to homeless hostels. Otherwise, there would be no need for them to exist. Refuge workers are trained to address the trauma and assist in the recovery process for people fleeing inter-partner and inter-family abuse. They provide access to counselling, legal advice, court representation, childcare, and other services that can be crucial to a victim's recovery. Crucially, these services are also offered on a floating support basis to help victims maintain independence by remaining in their home or at a safe place in the community. Split the Difference estimate that for every woman in Northern Ireland supported in refuge accommodation, 10 more are provided floating support. The Supporting People programme is by far the largest funder of services delivered by Women's Aid in Northern Ireland. Based on an exception for charities allowed under equality law, they are entitled to restrict their services to women only. It has been long understood that domestic abuse and inter-family disputes are a major cause of homelessness for both women and men, and in Northern Ireland 85% of rough sleepers are estimated to be male. The Housing Executive's current Supporting People strategic plan identifies domestic violence as an area of increasing future need. According to the statistical analysis that informs it, roughly twice as many single men present as an at-risk of homelessness than single women, and they also present in similar numbers to families at risk. The Department of Communities have advised us that the Housing Executive's strategic plan includes an action aligned to domestic violence to deliver new services and enhance delivery for people at risk of domestic violence. They advised us that new services will require additional funding and are subject to budget confirmation by one indication that vital services may finally be extended to male victims, is that in 2022 the Men's Advisory Project secured limited in-year funding from the Housing Executive to pilot a project to provide floating support and outreach services to men at risk of homelessness due to domestic abuse. In addition, the Cithra Foundation, who provides emergency accommodation to female victims of domestic abuse with funding support from the Supporting People programme, has been in discussion with the Department's Social Development and Justice for a number of years over their plans to provide sanctuary accommodation for men and their children seeking to escape abusive relationships.